I've talked about the sacrifices before, that they are not of the God of Israel, or that would mean the God of Israel is himself living in sin by teaching these wrong things, because he clearly says in so many of the scriptures, unlike what we've been taught, that he does not want animal sacrifices, he doesn't like them, and he doesn't accept them. So when they told us in the scriptures that he accepted it as a sweet smelling savor, the scribes were lying to us, and the teachers that continued to teach in biblical Israel were prophesying lies to the people. And we know the Most High did say that some prophets were lying. He also said in Deuteronomy chapter 13 and chapter 18 that the prophet that's lying, you should not have to fear his word. You don't have to fear that prophet. Basically, you don't have to follow him because he's not speaking for me. When they said, how will we know the prophet? But if the thing comes to pass, then I've spoken to him and sent him, and he is a good prophet. But if it does not come to pass, he's not of me, I didn't send him, and he's going to lead you downhill. There's no salvation there, basically. So, for all the sacrifices that Israel did, if it did not bring them to any true lasting salvation, but actually into captivities that ended their kingdom, or their kingdoms, because they eventually split into the two kingdoms, then these prophets were liars. In the scriptures, the priest, the prophet, all of them, they were liars who were saying these things, that Israel needed to be doing these things. You see, you only have to need one sacrifice, because the power of a sacrifice, an animal flesh sacrifice, if it was of God, would be so powerful it would take Israel into just permanent salvation. Instead, they might have been delivered from an enemy, but not delivered from their sin, their inner turmoil, their inner wickedness in their heart. This is why the New Testament tried to trick us, and this is not the New Testament as fake series, but this is what the New Testament was doing to try to trick us by saying the Calvary sacrifice is the ultimate sacrifice. It was God's original plan. Now, God's original plan was that man would live properly on the earth, live right, with justice and so on, and treat each other fairly and enjoy this existence on this earth and so on. Enjoy the creation and so on. But the New Testament was like, you just need the right sacrifice. So how is it that the right sacrifice was offered on Calvary, but Israel still was living in sin, still got deceived? And so the right sacrifice doesn't even bring them to true biblical knowledge and understanding, which would then lead one to perpetual salvation, ongoing, unbroken salvation and so on. So no, Calvary didn't lead to any place good. Now notice what it says in Mark 12, verse 27. He's not the God of the dead, but the God of the living. And he says, you therefore greatly err. So he's saying you are going the wrong way. Now listen, this pseudo son of God, Jesus, the Messiah, he says God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. Yet you go ahead and give him some dead animals in order to get life from him, in order to associate with his life, his eternal life and his blessings and so on. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living. So what he wants is living sacrifice from you, which is living right. In a world where so much wickedness was going on in the Bible times as now, your living sacrifice would have been to live right on the earth before the God of Israel. That would be a living sacrifice, because when people are doing so much wickedness around them in biblical times, to live right would be a sacrifice, an offering to God. I am offering you right living in a world that finds it so easy to do wicked things. So he's not the God of the dead, giving him dead sacrifices. He wants a living heart before you. Verse 28 to 33, And one of the scribes came, and having heard them reasoning together, and perceiving that he had answered them well, asked him, which is the first commandment of all? And Jesus answered him, the first of all the commandments is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart. So he's repeating some Torah stuff. And all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. And the second is like, namely this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than these. And the scribe said unto him, Well, master, thou hast said the truth, for there is one God, and there is none other but he. So notice Jesus struck down the animal sacrifices by saying God don't want no dead stuff, but he wants a good life by following the commandments and so on. So he struck down the animal sacrifices, and then he taught what God really wants, some right living. So now this scribe tries to take him on further. And then he says in verse 33, and to love him with all the heart, and with all the understanding, and with all the soul. So no animal sacrifice is needed for that stuff. And with all the strength, and to love his neighbor as himself is more than all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. So you see what it's saying even in the New Testament? That to love the Lord like this, which would let you treat other people in a good way, all this stuff, and keeping the commandments and so on, is stronger than all whole burnt offerings. So now it says here any G56:13, sorry, no, G39:56. Maybe it's pronounced pas, I don't know. But it says here, when he says all burnt offerings, each, every, any, all the whole. But that basically, so he's saying collectively, all the whole. The understanding that I get from that is that God is expecting you to count every sacrifice, or all the individual parts or movements of the ritual of sacrificing, everything you do, count up all of that. And all of those things are not enough when you complete the burnt offering. Not enough to please me. If you can look at it and say, but I washed my garments, I got up and I did this and did that, and I got my garments laid out ready and they're clean and so on, and I treated the animal right, I fed him at the right time of the morning, I made sure he wasn't hungry, I made sure he wasn't dehydrated, thirsty. You've done everything right. I sacrificed for my family first, for my house first, and so on, as the high priest, and now, and blah, 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 I did all this, did all that, whatever, the knife is clean and so on, whatever, we are now ready. I've repeated the Torah so many times this morning, and now we are ready. When you break up all the parts of the sacrifice, all of it still, because you have not left out any of the procedures that you should do for that day for the sacrifice to be completely offered up properly. No, instead, he's saying you should more count all the different parts of the Torah that you should do to live right on the earth with your brothers and with everybody else. So that way, you would more be received. Your offering of right living would more be received. Because you're looking at all the things you need to do to get your life right before God and with man on earth. Instead, they are looking at all the different things they need to do to cut up an animal and offer it to God, and he says he doesn't want it. Let's move on. Because this clearly shows here that all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices, they do not amount to the offering of right living before God. Let's look at what the Old Testament says now. Let's go to the book of Psalms. Alright, so in Psalm 50, verse 5, we have this nice verse that people like every time they hear it. Gather my saints together unto me, those that have made a covenant with me by sacrifice. So the writer here is pointing out that the saints are those who have made a covenant. They are not those who have gotten baptized, not those who received the Spirit to speak in tongues, but they are those who made a sacrifice. But we have been taught that the sacrifice was the animal slaughter on the high holy days and for the Passover and so on. But he's saying something else. They made a covenant, an agreement with me, a pledge with me by sacrifice. And it goes on now to explain this covenant sacrifice some more so you can get proper understanding. Let's run to verse 9, still Psalm 50 verse 9. I've got a few verses from Psalm 50. I will take no bullock out of thy house, nor he-goats out of thy folds. And I already told you verse 8 in another recording. I will not reprove thee for thy burnt offerings and sacrifices and so on. Because it's basically, in my view, saying I can't stop you from doing those sacrifices, so I'm not going to destroy you right now. Basically, you're getting more time, but I want you to turn around and so on. I can't stop you, so go ahead and do it. Because that's just the way you have chosen to live, the path you have chosen to walk. But I will not take any bullock out of the house. So how can you be giving God these bullocks, these lambs and so on to feed God? It's because you got it from the other nations that said God needs to be fed because they kill animals to feed their gods. Sometimes they put bushes and little even vegetables and so on to feed God. God does not eat that kind of stuff. Even if it's plants, he doesn't eat them. But certainly to kill the animals, he does not eat them. So he says, I will take no bullock out of thy house, nor he-goats out of thy folds. None. He's not saying he will take some of them, he will accept some of them, because Elijah is sacrificing on Mount Carmel. So you can't even try to bring the people back to God by sacrificing on Carmel and bring the people back with an unrighteous procedure. So Elijah was out to lunch. A powerful story, but the man was still out to lunch. You're going to do unrighteous, you're going to sin. Just to teach people not to sin. And you love your Torah so much, right? But I told you long time ago in another recording, the Bible is anti-Bible. It is telling you that it is wrong. Because how can Elijah sacrifice to bring the people back to a God who should not be sacrificing to him animals? But he says, I will take no bullock. He did not say, I will take some. Because once a year you need to do Passover and offer a sacrifice and kill a lamb. I will take a little bit of your animal sacrifices because you have that high holy day coming up. You got Day of Atonement and so on. So I will take a little bit, but don't go overboard all through the year offering them to me. Because I don't want all of them. He says, I will take no bullock out of thine house. Is it clear yet? Is it clear yet? Look at all the Bible commentaries and Bible dictionaries you have at home. Flip through them and see all the pages, all the pictures. I should have brought them here. I should have got one back here. This commentary stays in my car all the time. I can't bother to look for it now. I can't bother to pull it up now. But basically, I'll show you some other time. But you can look at it in your own Bible dictionaries, your Zondervan compact Bible dictionary that you love, and your other commentaries and Bible dictionaries. Every time you see a sacrificial picture in the Bible with a high priest with some square horned edges, 4 horns of the sacrifice and smoke going up with a priest offering an animal right there, every such picture is wrong. It's a lie. They were all written and printed and those pictures put in to deceive you. Every single Bible commentary and Bible dictionary on earth that shows you that the priests were offering their sacrifices to God is deceiving you, whether the people knew it when they were printing the books or not. It still ends up deceiving you, because it is teaching you that this is what you need to get back to, and that this was righteousness of Israel before God. No, every Bible dictionary and Bible commentary that shows you pictures of Israel offering sacrifices of animals to God in the Old Testament times are really showing you that these were all the times when Israel was living in transgression, because they were offering animals to the God who said, I do not want any bullocks, I will take none of them from you. I don't want a little, because you need to get right with me, because you need to repent. Because I do not grant repentance by animal flesh sacrifices. Not in the Old Testament, and not even in the New Testament on Calvary. All those books, they were wrong. And I believed it just like you, but I changed when I said I will read the Bible this time with common sense. So still Psalm 50, let's do verse 12 and 13. Notice he says, I will not take it. So basically, even if he's hungry, he's still not going to take it. Just like when they said Abraham was feeding the gods of his father, and he smashed them up and told his father, oh, I fed them, but they were all fighting over the food and broke up themselves and so on. Because people used to feed gods, and they still feed them today. People make their stuff in their house and they feed their gods these foods. And they see that the gods never eat them, because they end up throwing the stuff out in the garbage later on. And they say the God has accepted it. If he accepted it, it would not be there anymore on your sacrificial table, whatever you call it. Verse 12 from Psalm 50, if I were hungry, I would not tell thee. That means if you're offering sacrifices unto the God Yahweh in the Old Testament, whether you are King Solomon or somebody else, or Elijah, anybody else, or Israelites in the wilderness offering to so-called God, which turns out to be Molech, he says, if I were hungry, I would not tell thee, so I will take no bullock out of your house, out of your backyard, and so on. Why? Because even if I'm hungry, I don't have anything to do with that, but even if I'm hungry, I would not even let you know. So how come you know that God needs this sacrifice, so we should gather on the high holiday and slaughter them to feed God? And in the end, it's you who turn around and eat it. Till even in Samuel's house, they were fighting over Eli and so on. They were fighting over, the children were fighting over the best meats, the best part of the animal. This is something that man was doing, not God. And you are hearing the truth. Some of you for the first time on the Yalak Emet channel, you study notes, Torah commentary, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon. So I would not tell thee, for the world is mine and the fullness thereof. So if your fridge is full of food and your pantry and so on, you don't need to call up some friend and tell them that you're hungry. You got food in your kitchen, you just go and take some because it is yours. He's saying the world is mine, the fullness thereof. If I needed to eat, I would just eat. Without telling you anything about that, I'm making it your responsibility. It is not your responsibility to feed God, and it's not your responsibility to sacrifice flesh unto God. So you can see that in the New Testament story I read for you at the start, it ends up saying, from the Pseudo Son of God, it ends up showing you that the Father in heaven does not need these sacrifices. They all don't amount to anything to him but transgression. Verse 13, will I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of goats? He's not going to take them out. No bullocks will I take from your house. Why? Because I don't eat these things. So he's asking you a rhetorical question. something that you by common sense should already know, unless you have been deceived by years of Bible teaching that conditioned you toward misunderstandings and lies and so on. You should be able to get this answer for yourself. Will I eat all of this stuff, the flesh of these things, and drink the blood of goats? Eat my flesh and drink my blood. He says, will I do that? No. So if you're into that kind of stuff, you have not been taught anything about God. Because God would not teach you these things. If you are taught how to carefully keep Passover with animals and eating a lamb and so on, and they teach you how many days before you should go to the butcher, you have not learned anything about God. If you have not learned anything about God, I promise you, today, your heart does not know Him. But do you know your teachers? Of course. Do you know the doctrines? Certainly. You just don't know God. This is why sometimes in the scriptures, you will see the word seek, seek, seek. The Most High will say, seek me, and so on. And the psalmist David, he was seeking a lot and speaking it out. Because God realizes that there's just a lot of lying doctrines on the earth. So no matter what you hear, you must seek. Try to find Him for yourself. Verse 14, instead he says, offer unto God thanksgiving and pay thy vows unto the Most High. So if he's saying that this is what you should do, he's telling you, this is the kind of offering I want. Not flesh offerings of animals, a lamb and Calvary or a lamb in the Old Testament. Instead, the offering should be thanksgiving going up to God from your heart. Not flesh and blood from an animal. I know you washed the animal down, you made him nice and clean. You went to a very good butcher that you feel is clean in the way he operates his business and so on, and where he stores the animals and so on. But God says, that's not the offering I want. So look at verse 14, how it again powerfully destroys animal sacrifices in the entire Bible from Old to New Testament. Offer, so this is your offering unto God, thanksgiving. Alright, so this is what He wants. He's telling you what He wants. That's why He says, I will not take any bullocks from out of your house. But what will He more take? The thanksgiving, the praise, and so on. It says here, liturgical worship, hymn of praise, and so on. And even when Israel is finally delivered, He says you're going to sing a new song. Because what? He will take praise from you. When the new song is generated in your heart with a stronger praise because you're delivered. That's the kind of stuff you take from you. Not animal flesh and animal blood. Thanksgiving and pay thy vows unto the Most High. How are you paying the vows? Not by making an animal pay with his life. But He just told you, you pay it by thanksgiving and praise to your God. That's it. Because if you're living like that from an honest heart, with a backdrop of honest, righteous teachings, then you will be going out to do the right thing when you live on earth, after you come out of the privacy of your worship time to your God, when you were giving thanksgiving to Him. It would lead you to living right. But you go out and you live with wickedness that make many people complain truthfully about you, the things you've done to them, because you don't have truth in your heart. So your thanksgiving to God was not even received by God. So you don't have strength to live right and treat your neighbor right. But instead you go out and you live with wickedness. That's why He says, but unto the wicked, God says, what hast thou to declare my statutes? Why? Because the wicked are those who do not offer thanksgiving as a payment of their vows. But the wicked teach lies. Verse 18, when thou sawest a thief, thou consentest with him, and hast been partaker with adulterers. So it's like Israel saw the unrighteous who learned it from the other neighboring countries and probably strangers who passed through and taught them wicked things to sacrifice unto devils with these animal sacrifices. And Israel became a partaker with those people. So you got an Israelite who gave into idolatry. Maybe he was traveling and he saw it in another nation and he brought it back home. And the other Israelites became partakers with this adulterer, this adulterous Israelite, who was committing what they call like spiritual adultery with their idolatry of serving other gods by the sacrifices that was in their heart, that they said was to God. And other Israelites joined in and became partakers with adulterers in offering these wicked sacrifices. The last two verses, Psalm 50 verse 22 to 23. Now consider this, ye that forget God. He's letting you know, if you offer sacrifices of flesh, whether it's on Calvary or on any altar in the Old Testament, he is saying that you have forgotten your God. Now consider this, ye that forget God, lest I tear you in pieces. So it's continuing. That's why he's moving into a threat now to saying, lest I tear you in pieces. There be none to deliver. Because they went into captivity, it shows that they were torn in pieces and they have not been delivered. No man shall buy thee. It means that he tore them in pieces with no one to deliver because they forgot God. How can you tell that they forgot God? It's simple. How did I figure out all this Bible deception? Like 2 or 3 years ago. I read the Bible backwards and I still read the Bible backwards today. I read the Old Testament from Malachi all the way back to Genesis chapter 1 verse 1. And now again, I've done it many times, but again, I'm reading Revelations all the way back to Matthew. And then I'll jump from Malachi again now back to... So far, in the past, I don't know, week, because I still read other parts of the Bible sometimes, but now I'm at Mark chapter 14. Right? I read it backwards. And I consider the doctrines backwards. How do I study the Torah? I don't just simply start from the first part of the verse or the first part of the chapter. My point of entry into the text, into the chapter, into a verse is someplace in the middle or at the end of the verse or 3/4 of the way into the verse. If the verse has, let's say, 20 words in it, if I read like they've always taught us to read from the first word in the verse, or the first verse in the chapter, I will have the regular thinking and understanding of the text that we've always been given. But if I look at the chapter and I start reading from the 5th verse in the chapter, or if I'm reading a verse that has, let's say, 20 words, and I start reading at the 15th verse, the 15th word in the verse, out of 20 words, I start at word number 15, then my point of entry is different in the verse. It's at word 15 out of the 20 words in that verse. Does my point of entry into the verse allow the understanding to change? And can that understanding be supported by any other teaching in the Torah that would show something contradictory here? Does the Torah continue to stand and agree with the conventional understanding, traditional teachings and doctrines, if my point of entry in the verse or the chapter is different from starting at the start of the verse or the chapter? And that's when I figured out a ton load of deception was in the scriptures. My point of entry is different than when I was a child and when I first heard the Hebrew Israelite doctrine. That's how I figured out Hebrew Israelite doctrine is not from God. So they forgot God. Last verse, whoso offereth praise glorifieth me. So I will not take any bullock out of your house, but offer and pay your thanksgiving to God, your vow to God by thanksgiving. So he ends now the chapter saying, whoso offereth praise glorifieth me. But they taught you you're glorifying God if you kill another animal because it's a high holy day. Whoso offereth praise glorifieth me. So that praise is accepted because that's a sacrifice of praise that he wants, and thanksgiving and right living and so on. And to him that ordereth his conversation aright will I show the salvation of God. Not the ones who order the knife to be sharpened for the sacrifice. Not the one who orders the priest's clothes to be changed. Or he needs new garments. Let's make new garments for the priest, because the next high holiday is coming up. Not the one who orders the unblemished lamb to be checked a couple of days before and well fed and taken care of and so on. Not the one who orders those different parts of the ritual to be in line with each other. And then you teach people, see, it's line upon line. No. Because even deception, lies have line upon line. Just like the steps to hell have step after step going down to hell, just like the steps going up to heaven, with, like when you watch those movies and they show you steps to heaven, just like the steps to heaven have steps one after the other. You can climb up to heaven same way you can climb down to hell with lying doctrines. You can climb to heaven with right doctrines. So the line upon line has been used to teach you lies, taking you down to hell, when you thought just because they are line upon line and it sounds good, it sounds right, it's taking you to heaven. No, it's still a staircase, but it is going down to hell. You have heard the truth here today. Why am I teaching these things? You know, there's a verse that says, those that teach righteousness, they will shine like the stars in the sky or in the heavens, something like that. So I'm working for my reward. Not working for somebody to give me a position in the church anymore. I'm not in the church anymore. Not working for some Hebrew Israelite camp to receive me and so on and whatever anymore. And they already tried to get me on their site to come and work with them and so on, long time ago. I'm not working for that. I'm working for my reward from the Most High, the Creator, whatever he is really called, whatever his name is. If he got a name, he probably doesn't. I'm working for my reward. In a biblical way, I would put it like that, is to shine like the stars of the heavens. Are you going to work for such a reward? Or will you still continue to ignorantly teach lies? This is not a lesson of condemnation. It is a lesson of invitation. The scripture says, ye that forget God. Do not be ignorant anymore. Consider, have you forgotten God while walking to get toward God? Look and see that maybe you have been walking but in the wrong direction because your teachers have deceived you. Some have deceived you intentionally. Some did it with the right intention in their heart, the right feeling. They wanted to lead people the right way, but did not themselves know they were taught the wrong thing. It's an invitation. Hopefully, one day, you will be right beside me as we shine like the stars in the sky. The pseudo Son of God taught the truth. In Mark chapter 12, when he said, follow the commandments, in other words, follow the real instructions. And those things are more powerful than all animal flesh sacrifices. Yalak, Emet, Yalak Study Notes, Torah Commentary, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon. I'll see you in the next video. Better than that, I hope to see you in the skies, shining as bright as the Most High desires.